They jeered as he hobbled back to the settlement. Scarred, soiled, and barely able to stand. Merely another defeated canine, they remarked. Yet, concealed behind those weary eyes was a recollection no one was prepared to confront and a secret interred more deeply than anyone dared to excavate. What this wounded K9 recalled would unveil everything. And when the reality surfaced, he was no longer the one who appeared feeble. This narrative is one that lingers in the heart. The wind possessed a biting quality that morning, the type that makes your eyes water and prompts you to doubt all things. Beyond the town's periphery where the asphalt begins to fracture and paint flakes from derelict brick structures, a figure limped into sight, a solitary German shepherd, his ribs apparent beneath sparse fur, a cicatrix tracing his flank like a tale no one wished to hear. He positioned himself at the corroded gate of the old precinct, a location devoid of compassion for years, and simply waited. That was the entirety of his action. He just stood there, expectantly. Officer Clay was the first to spot him. He let out a chuckle, nudged Rivera, and announced, "Hey, take a look. The apparition of a former police dog is here for his retirement funds." They shared a laugh, flinging him a portion of a cold sandwich before retrieving their mobile devices. Snap, snap. Another heartless video for their social media feeds. The dog, however, did not respond. No yelps, no snarls, only those eyes, lackluster, glazed, and motionless yet not vacant. They were observing something imperceptible to others, something long concealed beneath layers of silence and haze. Across the roadway within a gloomy garage filled with broken vehicle components and the aroma of stale oil, Logan Barrett was tightening a bolt though his focus continually strayed. He observed the shepherd through his open garage entrance. That particular gait, that expression, that unwillingness to yield even when his presence was ignored. Logan recognized it intimately. One does not easily forget such suffering. He limped nearer to the window, his own wound from Afghanistan pulsating with a familiar discomfort, not a physical sensation, but something more profound, something mutual. The dog reappeared the following day and the day after that. Consistently in the same location, invariably silent, the officers started to feel a growing disquiet. Their jests became more strained, their laughter more abrupt. They could not fathom why he persisted in returning. They were at a loss as to how to handle something they couldn't humiliate into vanishing. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't disoriented. He was remembering. On the fourth evening, precipitation adorned the sidewalks like glistening silver streams. Thunder reverberated in the distance, yet the shepherd remained drenched and trembling. And when lightning rent the sky, his frame quivered, but he did not stir, as if awaiting someone who never materialized. That night, Logan did more than observe. He ventured outside, standing with him in the downpour. A canine and a man, both damaged in ways the world seldom acknowledges. Logan uttered no words. Nor did the dog. Yet an unspoken understanding passed between them. Old anguish encountering old anguish. And that is where it commenced. Not with a rescue, not with a leash, but simply with one individual finally determining that some matters merit remembrance even when all others consign them to oblivion. And while the town continued its usual rhythm, something had come back that would halt it completely. Something voiceless, something scarred, something that once bore a name, Shadow. And Shadow had returned with a clear intent. The deluge did not cease that night. It descended in torrents, battering the pavement as if attempting to cleanse the town of some deep-seated ugliness. Logan stood at the periphery of his garage, arms folded, gazing across the street. The precinct's amber security lamps flickered, projecting elongated, fractured silhouettes. And precisely there, beneath that monotonous hum, lay the German shepherd. Soaked, immobile, his breathing shallow. His body quaked with each gust of wind. Yet he did not withdraw. He did not flee. He simply remained as though his purpose was yet unfulfilled. Logan acted without deliberation. His feet moved onto the street instinctively. Officers Clay and Rivera observed from the steps, coffee cups in hand, still chortling over some triviality. Logan knelt beside the dog, noting the blood that had pooled beneath his hind leg, seeping into the mire. The fur surrounding the injury was matted and carried a faint odor of decay. One eye was swollen, almost entirely shut. But even then, Shadow looked up. Not with fear, nor with panic, but with a serene recognition, as if he had been anticipating Logan's arrival. "Your duty here is over," Logan stated, cradling him in his arms. "You've endured enough." From behind him, one of the officers sneered, "Seriously, that creature is a mobile infection." Logan did not even glance back. He transported the dog to his garage, the rain streaming from his shoulders like the burden of recollection. Inside, he gently placed the shepherd on a stack of clean cloths near the heater. He retrieved his old field medical kit, the very one he had utilized during blackout nights in Kandahar, and commenced his work. The injury was profound but not fatal. He cleansed it meticulously, uttering reassurances he hadn't voiced in years, not since the last occasion he had held such a fragile life in his hands. Shadow winced once as the antiseptic touched the raw tissue, then became still. Logan toiled in silence, his hands unwavering, though his thoughts were in turmoil. The dog's coat, the pattern of his scars, his musculature even in its atrophied state, something about him was uncannily familiar. It was then that he noticed it, barely discernible beneath layers of grime and weathering, a tag attached to the collar's metal ring. K9 Shadow. He murmured the name unconsciously, and the dog twitched. Logan became motionless. The atmosphere grew quiet. He repeated the name, this time more softly, more slowly. Shadow. And once more a response, a slight movement in the dog's jaw, a flicker of something long dormant. It was incomprehensible. Logan had been acquainted with K9 units during his service. He had even provided medical care to a few following IED incidents. But this was beyond belief. This dog was not merely a random stray. He had undergone training, been toughened and tested, yet here he was, collapsed on a floor, guided solely by instinct and fragmented memories leading him home. Logan glanced at the old photograph on his desk, himself alongside two handlers and their dogs. One of the canines bore a striking similarity to Shadow, the same gaze, the same physique. But the handler's face had been eroded by time, or perhaps by something more intentional. Logan felt it profoundly now. This was no mere chance occurrence. This dog had returned for a specific purpose. And Logan, whether prepared or not, was now entangled in it. As the storm intensified into the night, Logan enveloped Shadow in a thermal blanket and sat beside him. Two soldiers in quiet companionship, two beings with pasts so resonant they no longer required words. Morning arrived with a harsh slowness. Logan had not slept. The heater produced a low hum in the background while Shadow remained curled in a compact ball, his breathing a fragile rhythm like a delicate motor striving to continue functioning. Logan drank tepid coffee, his mind replaying all he had witnessed the previous night. There was no longer any space for coincidence. The collar, the demeanor, the twitch at the sound of his name, Shadow possessed a history connected to something long interred. And Logan was not the type of individual to disregard such indicators, particularly not from one who had battled his way back from the brink. Mid-morning, Logan carefully placed Shadow into his truck and navigated a circuitous back road to the one person he relied upon when solutions were elusive, Dr. Ella Morrow. She was the sort of veterinarian who not only healed animals but also comprehended them. She posed no inquiries upon seeing Logan carry the injured dog into her facility. She merely cleared the examination table and began her work. However, the instant she scanned for a microchip and the device emitted a beep, the situation transformed. "Logan," she said, her voice hushed, "you should probably take a look at this." She angled the screen towards him. The registry was obsolete, unlinked to any public database. It displayed a serial number connected to a classified K9 task force. No name, no handler, merely the identifier, Unit 9, Shadow. A knot formed in Logan's stomach. This was no ordinary unit. It was associated with a law enforcement operation that had been expunged from public records nearly 10 years prior. He had heard rumors during his time overseas, something concerning a bungled sting operation, a vanished officer, a sealed inquiry, but specifics were always scarce. And now, the evidence of it was bleeding on an examination table in a tranquil veterinary clinic. As Ella attended to the injuries, she observed something peculiar. Shadow had scar tissue on his front leg where a bullet had evidently been extracted. Not from a dogfight, nor from an accident. A clean surgical extraction. Someone had treated him previously, not with affection, but with haste and likely apprehension. On the journey back, Logan eschewed the main thoroughfare. He veered onto the overgrown track behind the precinct, leading to an old maintenance shed infrequently visited by the police. It was there that Shadow began to rouse. His ears flickered. He raised his head, scenting the air as if a memory had just been dislodged from the very depths of the earth. Logan halted the truck. Shadow disembarked, stiffly, hesitantly, yet resolutely. He limped towards the shed, slowly at first, then with increasing speed, circling the decaying timber as if it were whispering to him. He emitted a single bark, sharp, hoarse, desperate, then commenced digging. Logan stood motionless. The dog was not disoriented. He was not panicking. He was endeavoring to unearth something he knew resided there. A truth. Perhaps a memory with talents. Something had transpired behind that shed. Something everyone had striven to forget, but Shadow had not. Later that evening, Logan sat at his desk and retrieved a manila envelope marked 2013. Local newspaper clippings. It was the year that had altered everything. He scanned through headlines until one brought him to an abrupt halt. Officer Kent Heron, decorated narcotics investigator, missing after internal sting operation. Department offers no comment. Beneath the article was an indistinct photograph of Heron standing with a German shepherd by his side. Shadow. Logan gazed into the eyes of the dog in the picture, then turned to look at the actual canine sleeping beside his workbench. The same scar, the same physique, the same suppressed fury concealed behind years of allegiance. This was no longer merely about survival. Shadow had not returned because he was lost. He had come back to remember what everyone else had endeavored to erase from memory. Logan could not dismiss the image of that shed, not due to what he had witnessed, but because of what Shadow had sensed. That reaction, so abrupt, so concentrated, was not arbitrary. It was memory, something profound, something incomplete. The following morning, Logan revisited the location equipped with a crowbar, a flashlight, and Shadow at his side. The dog moved unhurriedly, his limp more noticeable now, yet his determination remained as firm as ever. Upon reaching the shed, Shadow showed no reluctance. He walked around to the side, ears pricked, and began pawing at the floorboards as if he had performed this action 1,000 times in his reveries. The wood groaned beneath Logan's boots. It exuded odors of mold, forgotten paint, and something more ancient, like concealed truths. Logan pried open one of the boards. Dust and soil flew out in clusters. Shadow barked once, sharply and urgently. Beneath the floor, enveloped in layers of canvas and decomposing plastic, lay a rusted tin box. Logan extracted it cautiously. His hands quivered, not from apprehension but from an emotion he had not experienced in years, righteous indignation. Within the box were partially incinerated photographs, a cloth badge stained with what appeared to be dried blood, a silver flash drive encased in cracked plastic, and a picture. It was a group photograph. 5 men in uniform, arms around one another, standing before an old precinct vehicle. In the corner sat Shadow, younger, his muscles defined, his eyes fierce. Beside him was a man Logan immediately recognized from the previous night's research. Officer Kent Heron. The atmosphere around Logan grew heavy. He could hear his own pulse in his ears. This was no longer a hypothesis. Shadow was not merely grieving. He was not simply wandering. He had returned because a task had been left unfinished. Something concealed so effectively it had taken nearly a decade and a dog's intuition to unearth it once more. Logan understood he needed to take action. But this was not mere evidence. This was a truth bomb. Consequently, he sought out someone who could assist him in processing what he had found. Dr. Morrow. When he presented her with the tin box, her response was not one of astonishment, but of profound sorrow. She had heard whispers years ago when she collaborated with law enforcement K9S, that certain officers had disappeared during special operations, that not all dogs returned unchanged, and some were never intended to return at all. She scrutinized the flash drive and badge with gloved hands, then looked at Logan, her voice imbued with a gravity no medical training could have prepared her for. You realize if you follow through with this, you're not merely seeking answers. You're unearthing something those in authority intended to keep buried. Logan did not waver. So was Shadow. Meanwhile, back at the station, Officer Clay had observed Logan's truck parked near the shed that morning. He reported it to Sheriff Mitchell, who offered a smile too thin to be credible. He's just nosing around, probably out of boredom. But as soon as Clay departed, Mitchell's expression altered. He picked up his telephone, dialed deliberately, and uttered a single sentence before disconnecting. We have a stray that has found its way back. That evening, Shadow did not sleep. He positioned himself near Logan's front door, vigilant, concentrated, protecting something more than just a dwelling, something far greater. And across town, the lights at the old precinct flickered once more, this time accompanied by the slow creak of a door that had remained unopened for years. Something was approaching, the kind of truth no insignia could conceal. Logan also found no rest that night. The significance of the tin box, the half-charred photograph, the badge. It all lay on his kitchen table like an exposed wound. Shadow remained curled by the door, observing every external sound with eyes that rarely blinked anymore. He had not barked since their visit to the shed. There was no need. Whatever this was, it transcended commands or instinct. It was deeply personal. The following morning, Logan made a decision. He drove directly to the precinct, not via the back alley, not discreetly. He parked conspicuously out front, boldly, intentionally. A mechanic in work boots and an old army jacket, carrying an evidence box swathed in a ragged towel. The instant he entered, the atmosphere palpably shifted. Officer Rivera looked up from his desk, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, then glanced towards the sheriff's office as if the very walls possessed ears. "I need to speak with Mitchell," Logan stated unequivocally. Rivera remained motionless for a moment. Then, without uttering a word, walked towards the rear and slightly opened the door. Seconds later, Sheriff Mitchell appeared, exuding smiles and a firm handshake, like a politician skilled in feigning just enough sincerity to be persuasive. Well, Barrett, I heard you've been investigating old specters. What brings you here?" Logan placed the box on the counter without any fanfare and looked him directly in the eyes. "You know precisely what this is." Mitchell's smile faltered, almost imperceptibly. "That's quite a find from your garage. That's Officer Heron's badge. His blood. His photograph. And that dog resting in my house? That's Shadow. The same K-9 unit you people claimed ran off." Mitchell did not react visibly, but the light in his gaze altered just a fraction, yet enough to validate everything Logan already suspected. Then, like a conjurer revealing a card, Mitchell's expression softened. "Logan, allow me to offer some counsel. Some narratives are best left untold, particularly those that have cost good men their careers or their lives." Logan offered no reply. He turned, exited, and did not glance back. But he was certain of one thing: Mitchell was concealing something. And Shadow somehow remembered what it was. Later that evening, Logan came home to find Shadow pacing, not like a dog requiring a walk, but like a soldier on high alert. That same primal intensity had returned. Logan stepped onto the porch, opened a beer, and observed the road. Something felt amiss. And his intuition was correct. By midnight, a blaze illuminated the sky from the rear of his property. Logan sprinted across the yard only to witness it, the old shed engulfed in flames. No thunderstorm, no accident, no coincidence. The fire brigade took 30 minutes to arrive, sufficient time for most of the potential evidence to be incinerated. Logan watched from a distance, his fists clenched, his jaw set. Shadow sat beside him, silent once more, staring as if he had seen this play out before, as if fire were merely another script written over memories he could not articulate. The subsequent day, Logan met Dr. Morrow in town and disclosed everything. He showed her the remnants of the badge, the flash drive now distorted by heat, and the photographs. She listened, her eyes wide with a silent intensity, then whispered, "You need to see this." She led him to a file cabinet in the rear of her clinic and extracted a folder labeled "Retired K-9 Transfers." Inside were documents, years old, itemizing every police dog she had assessed prior to reassignment. Shadow's name was absent, not a single mention. "He was never officially discharged," she stated. "They didn't retire him. They buried him." Abruptly, the truth clicked into place like a set trap. Shadow had not returned seeking solace. He had not come home due to confusion. He had come to complete the mission no one had permitted him to finish. And now, that mission had become personal because whoever was manipulating events from the shadows had just ignited a fire on the wrong man's land. And the dog they had abandoned? He remembered everything. By morning, the cinders from the incinerated shed had settled, but the unease in Logan's chest persisted. Whatever Shadow had journeyed back for, someone clearly wished for it to remain forgotten. That blaze was not a caution, it was an attempt to silence. Yet, they had critically misjudged something. Shadow was not merely a stray they could cow, he was trained, toughened, and engineered for survival. And Logan, he was not precisely the sort of individual to yield to intimidation, especially not from those who used uniforms to conceal the corruption beneath. Shadow, too, had altered. He was not merely recuperating, he was recollecting. That afternoon, Logan tried something, a practice from his past. He clicked his tongue twice, then made a hand gesture he had employed during joint operations with K-9 units in the Army. To his astonishment, Shadow reacted immediately, snapping to attention as if muscle memory had reignited something profound within him. Logan issued another command, low crouch, silent advance. Shadow performed it flawlessly. No reluctance, no hesitation. The understanding struck with the force of a locomotive. This dog had never ceased being a soldier. He had forgotten nothing. He had merely been awaiting someone to communicate in his language once more. Logan conferred with Dr. Morrow that evening. Both of them gathered around her desk, meticulously examining every surviving fragment from the charred box. One item had endured almost entirely, a partially preserved transfer document bearing a name and address, contact information for the next of kin, Naomi Heron, sister to Officer Kent Heron, the man everyone had forgotten. The man Shadow had not. Without a moment's delay, Logan set off. A modest farmhouse stood on the periphery of the county line, enveloped by tall grass and wind chimes that sang like distant recollections. Naomi answered the door in silence, but her eyes widened the instant she saw a Shadow in the passenger seat. Tears formed before a single word could be exchanged. Shadow disembarked from the truck independently, slowly, steadily, with purpose. Naomi sank to her knees as he neared, extending her hand as if to embrace a phantom. Shadow sniffed her hand once, then tenderly pressed his head against her chest. She wept softly, her fingers tracing through his fur as she had done countless times previously. He remembered her, every nuance, every aroma. Inside the dwelling, photographs adorned the mantelpiece, Officer Heron smiling, his arm around Shadow, training certificates, commendations. Tucked behind a fractured frame was a small thumb drive Naomi had safeguarded for years. "My brother gave it to me a week before he vanished," she whispered. "He told me to conceal it. Said if anything ever transpired, someone would come. Someone who understood the dog." Logan inserted the drive into Naomi's antiquated laptop. The screen illuminated. A video commenced, grainy, low resolution, yet distinct enough to deeply unsettle them both. Heron appeared on camera, visibly agitated. "If you're viewing this," he began, "then I didn't make it." He proceeded to detail the operation, an undercover sting concerning corrupt officers and missing drug money. He mentioned names. He mentioned Sheriff Mitchell. "They discovered I was recording everything. They intended to eliminate me and abandon the dog in the woods, but Shadow knew. He attempted to stop them, took a bullet for me. I sent him away, bleeding and disoriented, and I prayed to God he would survive." Logan leaned back in his chair, his throat parched. Naomi clutched the laptop as if it held the final pulse of her brother. And Shadow, he lay at her feet, his tail flicking languidly as if the weight he had shouldered for years had finally begun to ease. But the tempest was not yet over. Because now Logan possessed the crucial link, the truth, the confession, the reason Shadow had returned. He hadn't merely survived that night, they both had. And they were determined to complete what Heron had initiated. The laptop remained silent, the screen displaying Heron's final words, "Take care of him, he remembers." Logan and Naomi gazed at it, a gravity in the atmosphere that even time seemed hesitant to disturb. Shadow lay curled at Naomi's feet, not sleeping, but vigilant, possessing the calm demeanor of soldiers who understand their next move is imminent. Logan leaned back, let out a breath, and voiced what both were contemplating. "We take this to the state authorities, and we do it immediately." The strategy was not intricate, but neither was it without risk. Naomi duplicated the video onto a flash drive and created backups. Logan contacted an old acquaintance, Marcus Langley, a cyber forensics specialist turned whistleblower advocate, the type of individual who operated off the conventional grid and knew which governmental entities were too compromised to be trusted. Marcus consented to a rendezvous midway at a secluded diner near Route 71. It was not only safer, it was astute. Shadow rode in the rear seat, alert once more, his tail still, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. It was as if he recognized this particular stretch of highway, as if each mile registered on the odometer drew him nearer to a definitive conclusion. And so it was. They encountered Marcus as the sun descended, bathing the hills in hues of gold and bruised violet. Marcus appeared younger than Logan recalled, or perhaps simply less marred by regret. He took one look at the footage and became very still. "I can enhance the audio," Marcus stated. "Stabilize the video. Get this before the appropriate individuals." "But Logan, this will destroy careers. Are you certain you're prepared for that?" Logan did not flinch. "We owe it to him. Both of them." Marcus handed over a backup drive, his hand briefly touching Logan's as he murmured, "Then you need to locate all the fragments. I would wager everything Heron concealed more. That very night." Logan returned home, restless, and energy coursing through him like static electricity. He paced the living room until Shadow suddenly became alert and marched to the far corner of the house. Logan followed. The dog halted at a dusty bookshelf that had remained unmoved for years. Without hesitation, Shadow began pawing at the baseboard. Logan shifted it. Concealed behind it was a small, loose tile, and behind the tile, an old metal ammunition box. Inside was not currency or armaments, but something far more perilous: a second flash drive, a handwritten message, and a blood-smeared photograph. Heron and Shadow together, standing before an evidence locker. On the reverse, a number, 7-14-3, a code, a date, a location. Logan's eyes scanned the note. If they erase me, Shadow won't forget. He'll eat someone here. If you're reading this, don't stop. This town deserves the truth. That was the crux of it. Logan knew their next course of action. At dawn, Logan, Naomi, and Shadow went back to the remnants of the burned shed. Shadow sniffed the ground as if it still resonated with him. Then he commenced digging, not in a frenzy, but with methodical precision. Logan joined him, removing layers of charred earth until his fingers made contact with metal. Another box, securely sealed. Inside lay a flash drive, old police reports, photographs of marked currency, evidence tags, and the ultimate piece of the puzzle, a video file designated 7-14-3. Logan inserted the drive into Naomi's laptop right there in the open. The screen came alive. This was not a confession, it was irrefutable proof. A complete surveillance recording, a sting operation with audio. Officers laughing as they redirected seized funds into a concealed duffel bag. One officer leaned into the frame, Sheriff Mitchell. Logan sat back, a tempest raging in his chest. The dog beside him stood motionless, ears pricked forward as if the truth finally had a tangible form once more. They possessed what they required, and the world was on the verge of hearing it. The video file did not merely play, it exploded. Within hours of Logan transmitting it to Marcus, a maelstrom ensued. State investigators descended upon the town, unannounced and discerning. The evidence Marcus had meticulously cleaned and assembled was irrefutable. Individuals who once wore badges were now ensnared by the very justice system they had perverted. Sheriff Mitchell was relieved of his duties that same evening. The department that had derided an injured dog now found itself stripped of its protective silence, its secrets exposed to the full light of day for all to witness. Yet, justice is not invariably vociferous. Occasionally, it manifests as a tranquil town assembly before a courthouse. Logan stood at its center, his clean shirt neatly adjusted, his hands trembling slightly, not from apprehension, but from the sheer weight of all that had culminated in this instant. Beside him, Shadow sat in a full canine harness, not for intimidation, but as a mark of honor. The mayor, a woman who had once casually dismissed Shadow as a bother, now approached the microphone with visibly shaking fingers. Today, we recognize not merely a lapse in leadership, but a victory of loyalty. This town was preserved by a soul who cannot speak, yet who never ceased conveying the truth. Logan stepped forward when his name was called. The assembly fell into a profound silence. He looked down at the shepherd by his side, then up at the hundreds gathered, civilians, officers, reporters, and unfamiliar faces drawn by the unfolding saga. His voice quavered, but he persevered. This dog, he began, he didn't return seeking vengeance. He came back for someone who was lost. For a partner he never ceased awaiting. For truth, for resolution, for peace. Shadow didn't just recall what transpired, he bore its weight. Every stride, every scar, every sleepless night. He paused, swallowing with difficulty. You didn't return broken, he said, turning to the shepherd. You returned courageous. No applause ensued, only a profound quietude, the kind that signifies true listening, not mere hearing, the kind that settles deep within one's being. Later that evening, back at Logan's residence, Shadow lay on his preferred rug near the fireplace. Logan observed him sleeping, a deep and untroubled slumber, the sort of repose that comes only after enduring a tempest for years and finally setting it down. Weeks transitioned into months. The town gradually mended, narratives transformed, and hushed speculations of cover-ups yielded to discussions about reform. Shadow became a name familiar to children, a lesson imparted to officers, a stark reminder of what occurs when allegiance endures beyond deceit. Then, one morning, something novel materialized near the ruins of the incinerated shed. No grand ceremony, no ribbon cutting, just a bronze statue of a German shepherd, its gaze fixed upon the horizon. Upon its plaque, a mere 12 words, for those who were silenced and those who barked louder. People frequent it now. Some leave flowers, others simply sit in contemplation. And every evening, just as the sun dips below the trees, the air carries a familiar resonance, one short, steady bark. And somehow, everyone understands that Shadow is still keeping watch.